So, some new information out about what George is expected to do this fall from our friends at FanDuel. They have released a fair amount of over-unders. Obviously, they do this all the time, and we're at that point in the year. So, here's what they've got for the dogs. You tell me if this is about right. They've got Georgia at 11 and a half. The over-under is 11 and a half. Now, most of y'all know what over-under is, but I'll explain what that means in a second. Hey, listen, if you're going to G-Day, make sure you're going to our friends at Red Zone on Clayton Street. They'll be happy to help you with all sorts of stuff that they've got. They certainly have double dogs. You can order that down below. Stetson Bennett copy is also here. How long I'll have that, I don't know. But Red Zone's got all of the stuff that you need when you're visiting Athens. 11 and a half. Now, over under for people who are not gamblers. Full disclosure, I don't gamble on sports. But with that said, I track it really, really hard. So over under just means betting companies, casinos put numbers out that they feel like a team's break even is at for a season. So Georgia plays 12 games. The over under is they will win over or under 11 and a half games. So you're either betting that they're going undefeated, which is the over, or you're betting that the under, which is anything from 0 games to 11, you would bet the under. So this is only for the 12 game regular season. And I think all games have to be played, but I'm not as certain on that. There's a few others. Well, let's talk about the dogs first. We were talking about this earlier today. Matt DeBerry, Ryan Curley, and I were all talking about this during one of our shows, and Matt said he would take the over. Now, at some point, Georgia is not going to go undefeated through a regular season. I don't know if this season is the season where that will happen or not. I don't know. We've had, we've had, we have seen 2 seasons in a row where Georgia has gone back, back to back, 12 straight wins in the regular season. They have won all but two regular season games this decade. So that is not an insignificant accomplishment. But at some point, that won't happen. And I don't know when that will be. It doesn't look like 2023 is when we're going to kick off Georgia losing, but there's plenty of games they can lose. Now, you know, they do not have an opener that you're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh," but there's a few games that stick out that could be the 1 or 2 games that Georgia loses. They host South Carolina. I do not think they're going to lose to South Carolina, but they host them. South Carolina had a good close to the season with the Tennessee game and the Clemson game. So you had those. And then you have a trip to Auburn. Okay. So Auburn is not where they need to be to beat Georgia. However, they are going to host them. It will be game 5 of the season. One, two, three, four, five. What if Georgia doesn't really have their quarterback situation settled? What if they don't have, I mean, there's all sorts of things that could be popping up that are issues at that point in the season. You could say the same thing about the South Carolina game. I will mention Florida, but I don't buy that really hardly at all. And then the back-to-back of Ole Miss in Athens and Tennessee on the road. Look, I don't know if the Rebels will be able to keep up with Georgia that deep into the season. I mean, normally what happens with Ole Miss, particularly under Lane, is they seem to get out to good starts and then have a hard time as the season goes on. I do want to look at who Ole Miss is playing in that time, because that won't be easy to deal with either for them, because whereas they play Alabama early, typically last year they didn't. They play them early this season, but they will. Ole Miss will be coming off a game against Texas A&M, so the back-to-back there for for Ole Miss, it's asking something. The next week they play Louisiana Monroe, so not as big a deal. But I think I think if you're Georgia, I would be very comfortable playing Ole Miss at home. But then you got to go to Tennessee. That is going to be the trickiest game. Looking at it on paper right now, the Vols finished the season in the top 10 for sure. I think they might have been a top 5 team, no, a top 6 team, whatever it was. But that is going to be a very complicated and tricky game. They were the number 16. Tennessee finished number 6 in the country last year. They won't be going to Athens this time. Georgia will have to go to them. That's a hard game to win. I don't. It doesn't matter how good Tennessee is or not. It's a tricky game because Neyland is a real monster, and they get on top of you quick. Now, speaking of the Vols, they were one of the teams that was discussed here in this over/under situation, if I'm not mistaken. So we again, we're sitting here with Georgia at 11 and a half, which is a lot. And then you've got some other games too. LSU, excuse me, some other teams. LSU at 8.5. I don't know. I'd have to look at their schedule a little deeper. Tennessee at 9.5. Now that's a lot. Okay, that's a lot for Tennessee having to play both Alabama and Georgia. Because in theory, you're saying if they lose both those games, you're setting the over/under at they're not going to lose any other games, which is possible. I mean, I think Tennessee's in position here to be in good shape. Ohio State at 10.5. Um, you know, that seems low, I guess, but I would have to. I'm just going to quickly look at their schedule because that seems low. Now you got the Michigan game, which they've not won lately. Um, they play Notre Dame, so they play a road game at Notre Dame. They play Penn State. The Big Ten really is a joke. Um, so you've got those two teams. But Notre Dame is at 8.5. They've got to play Ohio State and Clemson. I don't know who else they play. Notre Dame. I that seems probably a little low to me, but that's me. And but they got to go. I mean, some of these are tricky. They got to play at NC State. They host Ohio State in game 4. They play Southern Cal, who's supposed to be pretty good. They play at Clemson. That's the Irish have managed 2 bye weeks here because they're playing early against Navy and they just roll on into the season. Like they go Navy and then straight into Tennessee State. Okay. And both those games are easy wins, you would imagine. And then they go to NC State. But anyway, they got double buys from in the last 6 weeks of the season. Notre Dame's off twice, so that's pretty good, I would say, for them. Now, going on into it, you also have I went to the wrong spot. But you also have there were a couple of more lines. Michigan, who's at 10.5, we know who they play, and then Penn State's at 9.5. Listen, Penn State, as long as James Franklin is their coach, and as long as Michigan and Ohio State are where they're at, they're not winning that division, which means they're losing at least one game in it. I do want to look at Penn State's schedule because it just cracks me up to consistently see, Penn State is like right on the edge and they never get it done. So they've won the Big Ten once and since 2016. I mean, if you're a power, you actually win the division. There's nobody you actually win the league. There's nobody on this schedule that is of consequence in any way. They play West Virginia, Illinois, Iowa, Northwestern. These are not teams that a quality program will lose to. Ohio State, I'll believe Penn State beating them when I see it. Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State. Ohio State and Michigan, you're probably not winning those games. Other than that, they're not playing somebody that matters. And the other thing that these Big Ten schools do, and you see this a lot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 home games. What is the goofball game? What am I missing here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know who they are playing on the road that they normally wouldn't, or if it's an uneven schedule in the Big Ten, which is quite clearly what it is, because they're playing Illinois on the road, Northwestern on the road. These places are not difficult to play at. They're jokes. Uh, they're going to play at Ohio State, at Maryland, and at Michigan State. So they have an unbalanced schedule. This is the season that they uh, go on the road more often than they play at home. I don't think I don't know what that's going to be like in the SEC when that eventually happens with this 9-game thing. But anyway, it's enough of killing Penn State. They're not worth talking about. 11 and a half is a lot. If you're talking about, Georgia's supposed to get the job done at 11 and a half, that means they go undefeated again in the regular season. That is not going to be a simple thing to do. This league is competitive. You got to go to Tennessee, but if we're talking gun to head, I would pick them to go undefeated. I'm just saying it's not going to be some simple thing. Thanks for watching. Join the newsletter. We'll see you on the website.